Smallpox was a devastating community, family disease. It had no respect for age or position.
One of the most frightening diseases the world has known.
It is the most awful of diseases that anyone can have.
Killed at least 300 million people in the last century.
Millions of people were affected by smallpox.
It was a terrible disease. There's no question.
The creation and development of the smallpox vaccine, the very first vaccine, saved millions of lives and was a medical breakthrough that not only broke barriers, but created barriers against smallpox and other diseases.
Smallpox starts with a prodrome of fever and rash.
And then it starts to bulge up. It starts to build fluid. It progressively gets worse. And these pustules that you see on the outside, you've also got those actually on the inside of the body as well.
The origin of smallpox is currently unknown, but it is thought to date back to the Egyptian Empire around 3rd century BCE. This is based on a smallpox-like rash found on 3 mummies. In the 7th century, Arab expansion spread smallpox into northern Africa, Spain, and Portugal. In the 10th century, smallpox spread to Asia Minor, the area of present-day Turkey. Smallpox is thought to arrive to the area from Asia through major trade routes like the Silk Road.
Smallpox entered Europe in the 11th century. Smallpox moved north 200 years later and was rendered an endemic to the previously unaffected Central and Northern Europe. In the 16th century, European colonization and the African slave trade imported smallpox into the Caribbean, as well as Central and South America. On the eastern coast of North America, the disease was introduced by the early settlers and led to a decline in the native population.
In the 17th century, European colonization spread smallpox into North America. The devastating effects of smallpox also gave rise to one of the first examples of biological warfare. During the French Indian War, Sir Geoffrey Amherst, the commander of the British forces in North America, suggested the deliberate use of smallpox to diminish the American Indian population hostile to the British.
In 1775, George Washington wrote a letter to John Hancock regarding threats of bioterrorism. Washington claimed a sailor alerted him of a British general deliberately infecting his soldiers with smallpox to spread the disease to Americans surrounding the Cambridge. Washington came to believe that smallpox was a deadly weapon Britain was using against the United States. In the 17th century, variolation came into play. It was a widespread method for preventing smallpox in the Ottoman Empire and Northern Africa. In a letter from Lady Montagu to Mrs. S.C., Montagu writes about smallpox engrafting, which was what inoculation was referred to as in Turkey during the early 1700s.
She describes the process of inoculation that nurses perform and says, "The smallpox, so fatal and so general amongst us, is here entirely harmless by the invention of engrafting." Montagu was the foremost person responsible for the introduction of the variolation technique to England. This case with smallpox broke medical barriers by introducing inoculation practices, which led to other vital discoveries and innovations. One of these life-changing findings was made by English doctor Edward Jenner in 1796.
Jenner was a medical student when he had a realization. He noticed that milkmaids who had contracted a disease called cowpox, which caused blistering on a cow's udders, did not catch smallpox. He had observed the severe effects of smallpox in humans, including skin eruptions and dangerous fevers. But unlike smallpox, cowpox led to just a few ill symptoms in the milkmaids.
On May 14, 1796, Jenner used 8-year-old James Phipps as his test subject. He took fluid from a cowpox blister and scratched it into Phipps' skin. A single blister appeared on the spot, but James recovered quickly.
On July 1st, Jenner inoculated Phipps again, but this time with smallpox matter. No disease developed, and the first vaccine in history was born.
It was Edward Jenner who was the person actually that found what he believed to be a way of preventing smallpox. That was a breakthrough. I mean, that really was a breakthrough in the development of vaccines.
Initially, Jenner faced barriers when spreading the word about his discovery.
He submitted a paper outlining his findings to the Philosophical Transactions, and it was rejected.
He was even advised to stop pursuing his ideas on vaccination any further.
Jenner went on to inform colleagues of his new procedure and supply vaccines in other British cities. In 1798, Jenner published his findings with an increased number of trials, some at his own expense.
Within 3 years, his publication, Inquiry into the Variola Vaccine, known as cowpox, had been translated into multiple languages. In 1802, the British Parliament acknowledged Jenner's important contribution and presented him with a monetary award.
In 1806, U.S. President Thomas Jefferson thanked Jenner in a letter for his groundbreaking discovery. He famously predicted, "Future generations will know by history only that the loathsome smallpox existed and by you has been extirpated."
Over the course of almost 200 years, the vaccine continued to save lives and annihilate smallpox. The vaccine was modified during this time. Instead of injecting individuals with the cowpox virus as Jenner had, the modified vaccine contained a live vaccinovirus.
This is a pox virus, similar to smallpox, but less harmful. Eradication programs began to appear around the world, and the vaccine was administered to thousands.
Yet still, over 300 million people died from smallpox in the 20th century alone. The effort was not as widespread as it needed to be to eradicate smallpox.
It was only with the establishment of the World Health Organization in the aftermath of World War II that international quality standards for the production of smallpox vaccines were introduced.
This shifted the fight against smallpox from a national to international agenda. It was the first time that global data collection on the prevalence of smallpox was undertaken.
In 1966, the World Health Organization provided the Intensified Smallpox Eradication Program, with funding to increase efforts for smallpox eradication.
Vaccines were administered around the world, and countries came together to eradicate smallpox.
But some were skeptical of the vaccine and did not readily accept vaccination.
Well, people were skeptical, in part because the vaccine caused a lot of reactions, and in rare cases, serious reactions. It was not risk-free, but the benefits far outweigh the risks.
Basically, we had 2 vials. One was a dry vial, like a powder form, if you like, and the other one had liquid in it, a dilution. And you mixed the 2 together, and then you would drop in this needle, which was bifurcated, and we would apply it to the person's arm.
With a lot of other people, especially if they did it not in a doctor's office, but in a campaign, they would use an injector gun because they could do that more quickly.
In 1977, the last naturally occurring case of smallpox was reported, and in 1980, the World Health Organization declared that smallpox had been officially eradicated.
For the first time in the history of humanity, an infectious disease afflicting humans had been vanquished.
The smallpox vaccine broke major barriers.
It was the first and only vaccine to officially eradicate a disease afflicting humans.
It also led to the creation of other vaccines and sparked eradication efforts of other diseases like polio, rubella, and measles.
It's estimated that if scientists hadn't developed the vaccine, 200 million lives would have been lost between 1980 and 2018.
The scientific world gained new medical instruments such as the bifurcated needle and banned practices like variolation. Many died from variolation, and the mild form of the disease, which the patient contracted, could spread, causing an epidemic.
Because of the vaccine, today, only small quantities of smallpox virus officially exist in 2 research laboratories in Atlanta, Georgia, and in Russia.
The global eradication of smallpox ranks among the greatest achievements in human history.
Smallpox was a nasty disease, but it gave us a lot of good things that we can share today.
It has shown that an international effort can be done to help achieve public health goals, so that was really important. It helped to show that it is possible to reach every corner of the earth when you need to in order to vaccinate, and just the cooperation that can happen and that can bring people together to get something done when we put our minds to it.
The most important thing of all is that nobody's getting sick and nobody's dying anymore because there is no smallpox anymore. And it's just an extraordinary medical and certainly public health accomplishment.